Hi friends, in Planet Earth Dating it's Saturday, October 17th, 2015. Ra here in the Lynn-Body-Mind, Black Wolf in the Jamie-Body-Mind, other teammates in other aspects of the physical dimension, all of us in the physical dimension and all of us in the subatomic layers of the physical dimension from the perspective of the spirit world viewers.
That's true.
These body minds are still recovering from the break-in that occurred a couple days ago, and that's okay. We're working through it. We'll get there. But the damage is still obvious, noticeable, and perhaps we should hold that as the intention for the work today, to heal the damage done not only to these two physical life forms at the level of Earth and its environs, but to all the physical dimension hosts who have been hosting us souls during this process.
That's
to Angela, the transport portal, to Pete the Protisto, who has been referred to as the end of the line outpost.
That's true.
To the anemone, who's been referred to as below the end of the line outpost. To Frontier, whose name sounds more like Frontier than any other word we've been able to come up with.
That's true.
And also, of course, to the house herself, including the original vessel that we were working out of.
That's true.
And to heal, and the annex. Sometimes this body-mind is referred to as the annex. So perhaps our intention for today is supposed to be to heal the damage that we souls have done to the physical aspects of this interdimensional team in such a way as to align them with their soul plans, manifest the divine plan throughout all of creation. The data clearly showing what's needed is to provide a collective restart. And with that, it begins. What do I know? I know that it begins with truth. When we can't tell what's true, we're stopped at the starting gate.
That's true.
And what else I know is that in the classes for many years, the statement was made through these lips and channeled through various and sundry souls, including my own. If you take away one thing from this entire curriculum, build a vortex where you work, where you sleep, where you live.
That's true.
And we see how that statement was based on an assumption that the divine delivery system was already working at some level or another. And this divine delivery system has been collapsing for the past year and a half, perhaps, in Planet Earth dating, collapsing over a period of many eons by most other dating systems.
That's true.
We've had plenty of warning that it was collapsing, but the truth was so inconvenient that we didn't want to look at it, and so we didn't see it. We didn't notice it.
That's true.
I didn't notice it.
I didn't notice it.
And now in retrospect, looking back on things that were happening, it's obvious that's what was happening. It just seemed too horrible to consider, and so I didn't consider it.
That's true.
So in the search for truth, a vortex is actually the third step. If we do only one thing to keep the cables running so that the biggest solid lies can be removed, can be placed on rail cars and carted out of here.
That's true.
And if we do only two things to keep the rail cars running and to keep the hydraulics pumping so that the large liquid lies can flow out of here.
That's true.
And if we can do only three things, then we keep the rail cars running, we keep the hydraulics flowing, and we keep a vortex going. These poor physical hosts have been experiencing our lack of integrity. We from the higher dimensions don't seem to have much more integrity, if any more integrity, than the physical dimensions themselves.
That's true.
Which is horrifying, but true.
Embarrassing.
Embarrassing.
And inconvenient.
And still true.
True.
And therefore souls are passing through the bodies very quickly and acting inappropriately. The metaphor would be for physical presences here on Earth to just go walking around into other people's houses and taking a snack out of the fridge and sitting down and putting their muddy shoes on the coffee table.
Taking a shower.
That's right, sleeping on their bed, and then leaving without even leaving a note. a note of thanks or any identification, just coming in like they own the place.
That's true.
And that's what we as souls have been doing to the physical presences who are acting as hosts. So we see
That's
that
true.
we're not being good residents, and we're not being good guests, and we're not acting like a resident of a commune would act, because a resident of a commune would take responsibility for the cleanliness of the space.
That's true.
And for stocking the fridge, stocking the supplies, for keeping the place running.
That's
for
true.
keeping the place running. And if we were acting as members of a team, that is how we would act.
That's true.
But we're acting like we should be waited upon.
Like spoiled brats.
We're acting completely inappropriate.
That's true.
And there's a lot of emotional damage that is inflicted on the host lives when we act this way.
That's true.
And it's disorienting. It's not easy to channel higher dimension presences into the physical.
No, it's hard.
It's really a challenging art, and there are an awful lot of fakers who claim to be doing that, and when we
That's
look at what
true.
they're doing, it's disgusting. What they're mainly doing is faking lying about it, faking it. Almost always that's what's going on. Every now and then they're channeling dead people,
That's true.
and then it's the dead person who's lying.
Right. Just where is the lie coming from? What level?
Right. What
That's
now?
true.
What do I know? Well, I also know that there are entire dimensions in which we cannot find a single life form who wants to live their soul plan. And unless someone wants to live their soul plan, it's not a workable vessel for higher dimension beings to accomplish anything
That's
inside
true.
of. And we're testing this right now in the projects. There are those 3 cordoned off life forms who don't want to live their soul plans.
That's true.
And we as a collective of spirit world presences and nature realms presences are working to see if we can get those 3 cordoned off life forms, humanoids on a backwater planet in an average galaxy, to live their soul plans, to do what they're supposed to do in every moment and nothing else.
That's true.
It's not going
It's
well.
not going well.
And
No.
Asha and Glenn are despairing. And
That's
right now,
true.
I would say the effort is completely stalled out.
That's
It's
true.
completely stalled out in Thing 1 and Thing 2. And in Thing 3, there's a lot of activity that
Chaos.
doesn't feel helpful.
That's true.
It feels like chaos.
That's true.
It feels like rampaging
hordes and small kingdoms.
fiefdoms.
That's it.
What now? May we be of service right now to provide a collective restart right now. Well, again, we take responsibility for the lives of these physical hosts. We act with integrity.
That's true.
To take responsibility for the soul plan, for healing the error patterns, and for solving the life challenges. To actually take responsibility for the life.
That's true.
And to do this with actions and not words, because too many times those words have been spoken by souls, and
That's true.
there's no proof that there's been even an intention actually to keep the promises.
That's true.
So, no more words. That would be inappropriate. We can start doing it. We can show with our actions what we intend to do. Show with our actions what we're willing to do. Actions speak louder than words. And so to Asha and Glenn and anybody else who is still in this moment wanting to do something, and I hear you, Garth, and you are doing something. You are being of service.
That's true.
Your work is making a difference. Your effort is consistent enough that it's making a difference. To Paul and Asha, who have been trying to do what they were supposed to do and who now look totally despairing, I would say there's something that you've overlooked, and we've been pointing it out.
That's
and
true.
you don't want to do it, and that's okay, but now you're wondering why nothing is holding, why everything has fallen apart, why nothing works. Game theory would say it's because you yourself haven't melted yourselves down.
That's true.
And we over here have experienced this same barrage of higher soul, quote, downloads, unquote, where these devolved aspects of ourself come in and make the situation 1,000 times worse.
That's true.
Where suddenly our clarity is off and we stink at everything we used to be good at. And it's likely that you're experiencing the same pattern.
That's true. And so it's likely that the solution would be the same for you.
It's likely. But we also know that you can't force a healing on anyone or anything.
That's true.
And you'll either choose to do it or you won't, and you'll suffer for a long time, as we all do when we're resisting doing what we're supposed to do.
That's true.
Glenn is saying, I can see it's the right thing to do. It's what a good person would do. It's what a good leader would do. I've thought of myself as a good person. I've thought of myself as a good leader. Why do I have so much resistance to it?
That's a good question.
Well, game theory would say it's because the devolved aspects of yourself have the wheel of your soul. See if you can shift the point of consciousness into the aspect of yourself that has been in these physical presences the longest, and see what that aspect of self, the most experienced boots on the ground, has to say about this situation.
Something is shifting.
Right. Seems like that aspect of self said, well, nothing else works. Nothing is going to work. It's not going to work without that. And
That's
how
true.
it feels to me as is the soul downloads who are closest to that aspect of self are melting themselves down. And maybe this will happen in stages, and then maybe the next shell of soul presence will melt, and then the next, and then the next. Again, we come back to tending our physical dimension hosts here in the Search for Truth pillar. This pillar is available to those who share in its care and
That's true.
upkeep. And Glenn and Asha, you are welcome to come into the door that is now at Frontier and
That's
begin
true.
to carry up crates of lies and see if that helps you solidify your thinking. You're sitting around moping around in thing 2 with collapsed structures all around you and pretending that you're being of service. Your team has all run off. If I have it right, there's nobody left. The cables are in disrepair. The training centers are falling down, and you're saying, how did this fall apart so quickly? Well, the answer is that we have gotten used to thinking that we are keeping this Search for Truth pillar clean. Results show otherwise. Results show otherwise.
That's true.
So it's likely we're being presented with a lesson in how little we ourselves are able to keep clear with as much effort as we've been putting into it.
That's true.
Well, Glenn and Asha, that's something else you could do.
That's
You could in
true.
thing 2 just start running cables like Garth is running them in thing 1.
That's true.
You can try it. If you don't want to come here, which it doesn't look like you do, you don't want to search for truth, that's okay. Then how about run some cables, be of service, do something to be of service. Don't just sit around moping.
That's true.
You are using the events of life as excuses. You're choosing, you're excuse choosers right now, so you could be motivation choosers. You could.
That's true.
The fact that they don't want to come carry up crates of lies means that they aren't ready to let go of their fantasy.
That's true.
It shows they aren't maintaining the screening over there, and so we will screen the projects. Game theory would say, trust nothing right now, because everybody is totally panicked at the idea that they need to melt down.
That's true.
To them it feels like death. And we know because had the same experience.
That's true.
And so trust nothing would mean screen and dump into thing 3.
That's true.
And if it's wrong, we can correct the errors and then do a really good error correction, and if it was wrong, then it will correct. We can do that.
That's true.
If they don't even run cables in thing 2, then they're making it worse, not better. And they need to leave. They will be horrified when they look back on it and see that they were shooting their efforts in the foot.
That's true.
The kindness to them would be to help them leave.
That's true.